The flames were small at first, just a faint flicker of orange licking at the corner of my daughter's school bag. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But then came the smoke, curling up like a dark ribbon in the air, carrying with it the unmistakable smell of burning plastic, crayons, and books. My heart dropped. I was standing by the window, coffee in hand, when I saw it. The backpack Ava had left on the porch, bright pink, covered in glittery patches of her favorite cartoon characters, was now the center of a growing fire. I froze. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't think. All I could hear was my daughter's voice behind me, soft and frightened. "Mom, my bag." I sprinted outside, barefoot, not even realizing I had dropped the mug, shards of ceramic cutting into my heel. But I didn't care. I grabbed the nearest garden hose and tried to spray the flames, but it was too late. The bag had already melted into a heap of blackened memories. Her notebooks, her reading book with the gold star from her teacher, her emergency inhaler, all gone. The fire hadn't just destroyed her school supplies, it had torched her sense of security. And then, I saw her, Karen. She was standing at her window across the courtyard, arms crossed, face stone cold. Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I wasn't just looking at a neighbor, I was looking at the woman who had done this. There was no shame in her expression, no surprise, just satisfaction. And when I screamed, "Did you see what happened?" She opened her sliding door slowly, stepped onto her porch, and said something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Something I wasn't prepared to hear, not as a mother, not as a human being, but what she said next, it shattered me more than the fire ever could. Before the fire, before the hatred, before the stares turned into silence and the silence turned into cruelty, life had finally begun to feel safe again. After years of fighting for accessible housing, Ava and I had moved into Parkridge Meadows, a neatly kept HOA-managed community on the edge of town that from the outside looked like every struggling single mother's dream. The sidewalks were wide, the lawns trimmed, and more importantly, every building had ramps and elevators. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to carry Ava up 3 flights of stairs while juggling groceries, medical bags, and a dozen stares of pity. I could just push her walker across smooth concrete and smile. And Ava, oh, she bloomed. Ava was born with cerebral palsy. It affected her muscle control and coordination, so she needed a mobility walker to get around and often needed help with tasks other kids her age did easily, like tying shoes or climbing up a slide. But her spirit? Unbreakable. She was 7 years old with the imagination of a novelist and the heart of a lion. Every time she looked at the world, she didn't see limitations, she saw colors. She painted, she read, she made stories with paper cutouts. "One day I'll write a book," she told me, "and I'll call it The Girl Who Could Fly Without Wings." Her favorite color was teal. Her favorite snack? Chocolate-covered pretzels. And her favorite time of day was morning, when she'd peek out the window to see if the ice cream truck had come early just for her. The first day we moved in, she waved at everyone, every single person. She even waved at a grumpy-looking woman across the courtyard who stood stiffly watering her plants with the precision of a soldier. "She looks like a statue," Ava giggled, "but I bet she's nice." That was Karen. I should have known then, but when you're exhausted and desperate for peace, you ignore the chill in the air. You convince yourself it's just the wind. Parkridge Meadows came with rules. Lots of them. The HOA sent us a welcome packet with 100 things we could and couldn't do. No decorative flags. No loud noise after 6 p.m. No leaving walkers or mobility aids in the hallways. That one stung. I called them immediately to explain Ava's walker had to stay by the door. It was too heavy and awkward to haul inside each time. The woman on the phone was polite, but cold. "Make accommodations," she said flatly, "or risk a fine." Still, I brushed it off. We had just moved in. I didn't want to make waves. Despite the stiff rules and the occasional awkward glance from neighbors, Ava loved our new life. She had a room with a big window and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. She made a dream corner with her favorite plush toys and storybooks. But nothing thrilled her more than the thought of starting at her new school. She said, "There's a library, Mom." A real library, she beamed one night, clutching her acceptance letter like it was Hogwarts. And the school has a ramp. And the teachers already know about my walker. We spent that weekend shopping for school supplies. She picked out every item with care, notebooks with glittery unicorns, teal pencils, and stickers to label everything. But the crown jewel was the backpack. It was pink, shiny, and had a heart-shaped pocket. She called it Sky because it sparkled like stars. It cost more than I could afford, but seeing her eyes light up made it worth every penny. On the first day of school, she insisted on walking all the way to the sidewalk on her own. I stood behind her, watching as she slowly made her way, arms shaking slightly, but with so much determination. Neighbors passed by. Some smiled. Others just looked. Karen watched too, from her porch, silent as ever, arms crossed. I gave her a polite nod. She didn't return it. The days that followed were sweet. Ava came home every day with stories. How Mrs. Langley let her be line leader, how she made a friend named Zoe who loved books just as much as she did. She drew pictures of her classroom, her library card, and one she labeled our home, where she'd drawn me her and Sky, the backpack, with hearts floating above us. At night, we read together. I'd lie beside her while she flipped pages with her little fingers, carefully pronouncing each word. "I like this place, Mom," she whispered once, eyes fluttering closed. "I feel like I belong here." And in that moment, so did I. But little did we know, behind trimmed hedges and HOA bylaws, behind stiff smiles and clipped greetings, something was festering. Something cruel. Something that didn't care about dreams or effort or disabilities. It was watching, waiting, and it was about to strike. The first time Karen spoke to me, it wasn't even a hello, it was a correction. It was the second week after we'd moved in. Ava and I had just returned from the store, and I was carefully guiding her walker up the sidewalk toward our building when I heard a sharp voice from across the courtyard. It began firm and matter-of-fact that ramp is technically supposed to be for emergency personnel only. I turned to see Karen standing on her front porch, clutching a garden hose like it was a badge of authority. Her silver-gray bob was perfectly in place, her polo shirt tucked in with military precision. Her eyes squinted like the sun had offended her personally. I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry," I said, stepping instinctively between her gaze and Ava. "The ramp," she repeated, waving the hose vaguely. "I'm just letting you know in case you didn't read the community guidelines. That kind of thing is why we have a homeowners association, to avoid misuse." I looked at Ava, who was leaning on her walker, watching quietly. Her backpack dangled from one handle, and her small face flushed in the sun. I managed a polite smile and replied, "It's for accessibility. My daughter can't use stairs." Karen's lips twitched into a semblance of a smile, but her eyes didn't match. "Well, I just thought I'd mention it. We've had incidents before, and you're new." She turned and went back inside without another word. That should have been my warning. Over the next few weeks, Karen became a regular presence in our periphery. Always there, always watching, never quite friendly, never quite hostile. The kind of neighbor who never waves first, but always watches long enough to make you wonder if you've done something wrong. I started noticing how often she seemed to be outside when Ava and I were, whether we were coming back from school, going to the mailbox, or sitting out on the porch for fresh air. There she was, trimming already trimmed hedges, watering plants in slow motion, picking up imaginary debris from her driveway. At first, I thought it was coincidence, or maybe just boredom. But then the HOA letters started. The first was about our trash bins. Apparently, they had been left out too long, 5 minutes past the 6 p.m. deadline. I laughed at first. 5 minutes? But then came the second letter. Unapproved exterior item obstructing shared space. They were referring to Ava's walker, which I left just outside our door, so I could help her in and out without carrying it every time. I called the HOA again to explain, and again, I was met with robotic coldness. "Rules apply to all homeowners," the woman said. "Special accommodations must be requested in writing and reviewed quarterly." That night, I moved the walker inside and accidentally scratched the paint off the wall doing so. Ava noticed the change immediately. "Mom, why isn't it outside?" I hesitated. Some people here don't like things in the hallway. Her eyes widened. "But it's my legs." "I know, baby." A few days later, Ava was outside playing with Zoe and another little girl from down the block. They were pretending the sidewalk was a magical racetrack, and Ava was using her walker to chase fairies. She was laughing, a deep, joyful kind of laugh that I hadn't heard in so long. I was watching from a distance, heart full, when Karen stepped out of her house and called across the yard. "Excuse me, do they have permission to play there?" The other girls stopped. Ava paused too, confused. Karen walked closer, her expression blank. "That's a common space. Children shouldn't be loitering unsupervised." "I'm right here," I called out, walking over trying to stay calm. "Well," Karen huffed, eyes flicking to Ava, "she's clearly not able to keep up anyway. It's not fair to the others." That was the first time I saw Ava shrink. She looked down at her shoes and said nothing. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just picked Ava up, told the girls' playtime was over, and walked her inside. That night, she didn't draw. She didn't ask for a bedtime story. She just curled up and whispered, "I'm sorry I'm slow, Mom." My throat burned with rage and heartbreak. Still, I tried to tell myself it was just one woman's ignorance. That Karen was a relic of another time, a cold and bitter person whose cruelty stemmed from unhappiness. But each day, her actions got bolder. She started taking pictures of us from her porch through her curtains. I once caught her crouching by our porch bush photographing the walker as if it were contraband. Another time, a letter arrived saying my vehicle had exceeded guest parking time limits, even though it was registered and parked in my designated spot. The message was clear: we were being watched, tracked, targeted. Karen never cursed, never raised her voice. She was too smart for that. Her power came from implication, from looking down her nose while hiding behind rules. She wasn't just enforcing the HOA bylaws, she was the HOA. Every letter felt like it came from her. Every sideways glance from a neighbor had her cold signature disapproval stitched into it. And yet, in front of others, she played polite, polished. She hosted garden club meetings and handed out cookies at community nights. She even had the audacity to ask if I would consider donating Ava's books to the community library, since some of the younger children might appreciate stories that are more appropriate for their level. I looked at her and said nothing, but something inside me cracked that day. I realized this wasn't just passive aggression. It wasn't even personal anymore. It was targeted, and it was only the beginning. It wasn't long after that chilling comment about Ava keeping up that things began to spiral. The hostility wasn't just under the surface anymore. It started to seep into our daily lives, thick and poisonous like mold behind wallpaper. Karen's microaggressions transformed into overt acts of obstruction. Her passive stares became calculated provocations. And the worst part? No one said a word. The same neighbors who once waved, who complimented Ava's drawings on the sidewalk, now walked past us like we were invisible, or worse, contagious. One morning, I opened the front door to find a folded notice taped to our doorknob. It wasn't a letter from the HOA. It was handwritten. Neat. Cold. Please keep disabled equipment out of sight. This is a family-friendly community. Don't lower our standards. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I crumpled the note and tucked it into my pocket, determined not to let Ava see it. But she noticed my silence during breakfast. She always did. "Is something wrong, Mom?" she asked between bites of cereal. "No, baby, elite. Everything's fine." Except it wasn't. Later that day, I tried to park in my own designated space, only to find it blocked by Karen's SUV. She was standing by the driver's side door, casually watering her already drenched rose bushes. I rolled down my window and said, "Hey, I think you might be in my spot." She didn't move. She just kept watering, slow and deliberate. Then she looked up, squinted as if just noticing me, and said, "Oh, is this your space? Sorry." I thought the signs were just a suggestion. I didn't respond. I reversed the car and circled the block until another spot opened up 3 buildings away. Then I carried Ava, walker, backpack, and all through the rain. By the time we reached our front door, we were both soaked. Ava was shivering, her little fingers frozen stiff as I dried her off. Why couldn't we park close? She asked through chattering teeth. Someone was using our spot, I replied, forcing a calm tone. She looked at me with innocent confusion. But that's not fair. No, it wasn't. The next week, Karen escalated. Ava and I returned from school one afternoon to find a new HOA violation slip stuck to our door. This one claimed we had altered the community property without board approval. I was stunned. What property? What alteration? I called the number listed on the form, and after 45 minutes on hold, the HOA representative finally clarified the wheelchair ramp you installed without proper design approval. Ramp? My jaw dropped. The ramp was already there when we moved in. It's a permanent fixture built by the builder. It's part of the ADA compliance. Well, she said coolly, a complaint was submitted alleging unauthorized modifications and aesthetic damage. It'll be investigated. I hung up the phone, shaking. Someone had actually filed a formal complaint to remove the only thing that made our building livable for Ava. Someone had said it didn't fit the aesthetic. There was no doubt in my mind who had submitted that complaint. I marched straight to the HOA office, Ava in tow. The manager, young, polite, and visibly uncomfortable, said he couldn't discuss the identity of the complainant, but assured me they'd look into it. When I demanded to know whether they even understood ADA requirements, he shifted in his chair and mumbled something about balancing accessibility with neighborhood character. I left that meeting with nothing but a headache and Ava's soft voice asking, "Mom, are they taking away my ramp?" "No, sweetheart," I said. "Not if I have anything to say about it." That night, Ava asked if she could skip school the next day. When I asked why, she looked at her feet and whispered, "Because Karen was watching me again today." She followed me with her phone when I got off the bus, and she told Zoe's mom that I make the sidewalk unsafe. Unsafe. My daughter, who had never hurt a soul, who moved carefully and gently through the world, who held the handrails tighter than most adults because she knew she had to. I held her close that night, but the fire inside me was growing. The final straw before the incident came a few days later. Ava and I had just returned from therapy. It was late, and she was tired. As I unlocked the door, I noticed something strange. Her sidewalk chalk drawings were gone. Not smudged, not faded, scrubbed. The rainbow she'd drawn with Zoe, the stars, the cat with the wheelchair, all of it scrubbed clean with what looked like bleach streaks, and written faintly in soap across the concrete, "Property not play space. Learn some respect." I knew Ava saw it too, but she didn't say a word. She just walked inside and curled up on the couch. She didn't want dinner. She didn't ask for cartoons. She didn't even want her bedtime story. I sat in the dark that night, staring at the chalk-scrubbed sidewalk through the window, wondering when exactly this place, this supposed community, had turned its back on us. The families who once smiled at us now avoided eye contact. Zoe's mom, once warm and talkative, now barely nodded. I sent an email to the HOA. No reply. I knocked on a neighbor's door to ask if they'd seen anything. They looked through the peephole, then turned off the porch light. Everyone saw. No one spoke. Because Karen wasn't just a neighbor, she was the voice of the HOA, the unofficial enforcer. The one who'd lived there the longest, hosted the board meetings, handed out holiday flyers, and knew just how to manipulate the rulebook to bend the world in her favor. And with every passing day, she was tightening the noose around our lives. Not with violence, not with threats, but with notes, with rules, with silence. She wanted us gone, and I was starting to wonder if she would go even further to make that happen. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of crisp autumn day that made everything feel softer. The trees had just begun to shed their amber and gold leaves, and the air was filled with that in-between scent of summer warmth and approaching cold. Ava had just come home from school, her cheeks flushed from excitement. She'd aced her spelling quiz, drawn a picture for her teacher, and had been named Kindness Star for the week. She was glowing. She had that joy about her, the kind that radiated from inside and couldn't be dimmed by anything, or so I thought. As we walked up to the building, Ava was chattering about how her friend Zoe had invited her to a Halloween event next week and how she wanted to go as a flying librarian with magic books. I smiled, holding the door open for her as she shuffled her walker over the threshold. It wasn't until we got to the top of the ramp that she gasped and turned toward me. "My backpack," she said. "I left it on the porch when I went to play yesterday. I think it's still outside." I furrowed my brow. She had a habit of leaving things behind when she got excited, but Sky, her prized pink sparkly backpack, that was rare. I told her to head inside, that I'd grab it. She nodded and carefully maneuvered toward the apartment. I turned and jogged down the ramp, expecting to find the backpack tucked under the porch bench or perhaps leaning against the stair rail, but it wasn't there. I scanned the yard. My heart skipped. And then, on the far edge of the courtyard near the shared flower beds, I saw it. A faint puff of smoke rising. At first, I didn't register it. Just a slow, lazy curl of gray, like someone had burned leaves. But the smell hit me, acrid, chemical, suffocating. Burning plastic, burning fabric, burning something important. Then I saw the color, the unmistakable shimmer of pink vinyl already half melted and folding into itself like wax under a match. I froze for a moment. Everything around me disappeared. The sounds of the kids playing down the street, the buzz of distant lawnmowers. All I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears, pounding like war drums. I sprinted toward the fire. The backpack, Sky, was lying in the grass, surrounded by a blackened circle where the flames were still licking at the edges. Her math notebook, its corners now singed. Her reading book, pages curling. A blistered plastic case that had held her emergency inhaler. The little name tag we'd written together in glitter pen, now ash. I dropped to my knees, slapping the flames with my sweater, tears springing into my eyes, not from the smoke, but from a deep, primal rage and helplessness I hadn't felt since the day she was diagnosed. Then I heard her. Karen. Calm. Steady. I turned my head and saw her, arms crossed, standing on her porch like nothing out of the ordinary was happening. She wasn't even trying to hide the lighter in her hand, still warm from use. "What the hell did you do?" I screamed. She blinked slowly, unfazed. And then she said it, the sentence that would never stop ringing in my ears. The one that punched a hole through my heart and lit a different kind of fire in my soul. She doesn't deserve school. My mind went blank. I stood up, shaking with fury. "What did you just say?" I shouted. Karen didn't flinch. She looked me up and down like I was nothing more than an insect she hadn't decided whether to crush or ignore. "I warned you," she said simply. "This neighborhood has standards. And you bringing that burden here has made it worse for all of us." She said burden like Ava was a piece of old furniture left out on the curb. By now, Ava had come outside. I heard her walker's faint wheels rolling on the concrete, her breath short with panic. "Mom, what's that smell?" I turned, blocking her view with my body. "Go inside, Ava." But she had already seen the remains. Her face dropped. She let go of her walker and fell to her knees beside the charred shell of her backpack. Her little hands trembled as she tried to pick it up, only to drop it again when the hot plastic singed her palm. "My books," she whispered. "My medicine, my stars." I knelt beside her, wrapping my arms around her. She sobbed into my chest, her small shoulders racked with grief. Why would someone do this? She cried. Was I bad? "No, baby," I whispered. "You did nothing wrong." Karen scoffed from her porch. "Oh, spare me the dramatics. Maybe this'll teach you both a lesson. Some people just don't belong here. You're not special just because she's broken." That was it. I stood up and walked toward her, shaking with fury. "You need help," I hissed. She sneered. "No, sweetheart. You need to take your charity case and find a place that caters to your kind. This community is for families who contribute, not leech." By this point, a few neighbors had gathered nearby. They had their phones out, watching in silence. No one stepped forward. No one said a word. Just wide eyes, shallow breaths, and cowardice. I called the police. I reported the arson. I pointed to the burned remains, the lighter still visible in Karen's hand, the hateful words she had just spewed. And still she didn't run, because Karen believed she was untouchable, because she thought her age, her HOA ties, her calculated calm would shield her from consequences. And for a moment I feared she was right. The officers who arrived were young, uncertain. They spoke in careful tones, asked bland questions. Karen played innocent, claimed she found the backpack on fire and tried to contain it, claimed I had always been unbalanced, that I couldn't handle the pressure of parenting a child with needs. But Ava spoke. Still trembling, she clutched my hand and told him what she saw. She described how Karen had glared at her on the bus that day, how she heard Karen mutter, "Not in my neighborhood," under her breath last week, how she remembered Karen looking straight at her backpack and saying, "I bet your little fire trap can't even be recycled." And then one of the neighbors who had stayed silent, an older man from the building across the lot, stepped forward and held up his phone. "I recorded the whole thing," he said. The air shifted. The officers took the recording. Karen's face finally cracked, just for a second. The mask slipped. Her mouth twitched into something that wasn't quite fear, but it was close enough to be satisfying. They placed her under arrest for malicious destruction of property and endangering a minor. As they read her rights, she yelled at me, "You will regret this. You'll ruin your daughter dragging her into this circus." I didn't reply. I just held Ava tighter than ever and whispered, "You are not a burden. You are my light." As Karen was taken away in the back of a squad car, Ava looked up at me and asked, "Can we get a new backpack?" "Yes," I said, wiping her tears. "And this time, we're filling it with even more stars." Because no fire, no hatred, would ever be enough to dim her light again. The days that followed the fire were heavy, suffocating, like the smoke still lingered in our lungs and under our skin. Ava didn't want to go outside. She didn't ask for the ice cream truck. She didn't draw. Her sketchbooks sat untouched on her shelf, and the new backpack I bought her, though bright and colorful, stayed zipped and forgotten by the door. She couldn't sleep. She'd toss and turn, jolting awake with gasps, clutching her stuffed bear, so tight the seams threatened to burst. One night, I found her sitting at the foot of her bed, knees pulled to her chest, whispering, "Why does she hate me?" over and over again. I held her for an hour, trying to be strong. But at some point, I couldn't hold back anymore. I broke down right there with her, my arms wrapped around her, the tears finally crashing through the dam I'd built inside myself. I whispered back, "She doesn't know you. If she did, she'd know there's nothing in this world to hate." But Ava didn't believe me. And honestly, neither did I. The community, once a promise of safety and belonging, now felt like a minefield. We avoided the courtyard entirely. I changed our route to school. I pulled Ava out of her after-school program because she didn't feel safe waiting outside. Every movement now required planning, every exit, every glance over our shoulder. She didn't want to go to school, afraid someone would laugh or ask about the fire. The light in her eyes dimmed. She'd sit in silence for hours, no longer asking why people could be so cruel, as if she had accepted it, as if she'd absorbed Karen's hatred and carved it into herself. That's when I knew I had to confront Karen. Not for revenge, but for truth, for something to give Ava back her peace. I went to her house the day after she posted bail. Her porch was littered with her usual plants, perfectly trimmed. The burnt scent was gone, replaced with the strong, artificial perfume of denial. She opened the door before I even knocked, almost like she'd been waiting. "Well," she said, a twisted smile curling on her lips, "if it isn't Mother of the Year." I didn't respond right away. My hands were shaking, but I steadied my breath. "You don't get to pretend this didn't happen." She scoffed. "I didn't set anything on fire. You're lucky I didn't file a harassment suit. You and that little girl of yours are turning this neighborhood into a circus." I clenched my jaw. "You think this is about the neighborhood? This is about a child. A child who did nothing to you. A child who now cries herself to sleep because you made her feel like she doesn't belong." Karen didn't flinch. She crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe like we were discussing weather, not arson. "She's weak," she said coldly, "and people like you use her to get sympathy. But this community, my community, isn't a charity." That was when something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. You can play this game with the HOA, with the neighbors, with the police, but you'll never win against a mother protecting her child. And you will never make Ava feel small again. I won't allow it. Karen narrowed her eyes. "You don't belong here." "Maybe not," I said, "but you don't deserve to lead here." I walked away, my heart racing, the silence behind me louder than any words she could have shouted. But as expected, the HOA did nothing. They sent a bland email acknowledging the unfortunate situation and expressed hope that both parties could find a resolution without further disruption to the neighborhood. No mention of charges, no apology, no condemnation, just polished indifference. I filed formal complaints, submitted the police report, and forwarded the video footage. But everything moved slowly, bogged down in red tape. Karen claimed she had simply found the backpack burning and had tried to stomp it out. Her attorney argued that emotional overreaction from the other party was clouding the facts. And the neighborhood? Silent. The same neighbors who once invited us to be BQs now walked faster when they saw me coming. Zoe's mother pulled her daughter away whenever Ava came near. The man who'd filmed Karen gave a quiet nod in passing, but said nothing more. One evening, after yet another fruitless call with the HOA board, I collapsed on the kitchen floor, phone still in hand. I sobbed into my knees until my chest ached. All I wanted was to protect Ava, to keep her safe. But I couldn't erase the fire. I couldn't erase Karen's words. Then I felt a tiny hand on my back. It was Ava. She didn't say anything. She just curled up next to me on the cold tile floor and leaned her head against my shoulder. And in that moment, I realized something. Karen could burn backpacks. She could whisper cruelty. She could try to twist rules and manipulate fear. But what she couldn't do was break the bond between a mother and daughter. She couldn't take our resilience. She couldn't take Ava's voice. And we were going to fight until the world heard it. It had been a week since the fire, and I was beginning to feel the weight of hopelessness settle into my bones. The police report had been filed, the incident documented, and the charred remains of Ava's backpack had been bagged as evidence. But without irrefutable proof, something that showed Karen holding the lighter, something that couldn't be twisted or denied. The system seemed frozen. Karen had returned to her routine like nothing had happened. She trimmed her hedges, watered her plants, gave a tight-lipped smile to neighbors. She even left a plate of stale cookies outside the HOA office with a card that said, "Let's move forward in grace." Grace. The word made me sick. Ava had started sleeping with the hallway light on again. Every time the wind creaked against the windows, she'd wake up and whisper, "Is she out there?" And all I could do was wrap her tighter and promise that I wouldn't let anything happen to her. But I was running out of promises. Then, one morning, something unexpected arrived. It was an unmarked envelope slid beneath our door while we were out at Ava's therapy appointment. No name, no return address. Inside was a flash drive taped to a piece of paper. In shaky handwriting, it said only, "Thought you might need this. She's not untouchable." I stared at the words, my pulse racing. I rushed to my laptop and plugged the drive in. There was a single video file. I pressed play. The footage was grainy, captured from a mounted security camera, likely one of the discreet ones a neighbor had installed for porch safety. It showed the courtyard in the late afternoon, shadows long, sunlight dim. There was Ava's backpack lying on the bench near the planter box, exactly where she had left it the day before. Then, slowly, Karen entered the frame. She glanced around, clutching something in her hand. She bent down, looked straight at the bag. Then, clear as day, she pulled out a small silver lighter. The flame flickered once, twice. Then she touched it to the base of the backpack. At first, nothing happened. But then the plastic caught, the corner curling, smoke beginning to rise. Karen stood back, watching with eerie calm. After a few seconds, she turned and walked away. No panic, no shock, just satisfaction. My mouth went dry. My hands were shaking as I paused the video, rewound, played it again. It was real, undeniable, cold, calculated arson. And suddenly everything changed. I emailed the video to the police immediately. I forwarded it to the detective assigned to our case and requested an in-person follow-up. I didn't even give them time to respond. I showed up at the station with Ava's file, the flash drive in hand, and the rage of a mother who finally had ammunition. When the officer saw the footage, his expression shifted from polite neutrality to quiet disbelief. This, he said, pausing the frame on Karen's face, is exactly what we needed. That night, things began to stir. I noticed Karen wasn't on her porch. The curtains in her windows were drawn. Her SUV, usually parked at a crooked angle in front of my space, was gone. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, the silence of the neighborhood felt different. Not complicit, but curious, watching. The next day, Karen appeared outside with a different energy. She looked pale, her hair unbrushed, her posture no longer defiant, but cautious. She avoided my gaze. She didn't yell across the courtyard. She didn't say a word. Later that afternoon, I saw her talking to someone from the HOA board. They stood close, whispering. The board member, usually stiff and unreadable, nodded gravely. Something had shifted. Because Karen knew now, the truth was out there. And this time, it was watching her. The video didn't stay private for long. It started with the police reopening the investigation, this time with real momentum. The detective who had once been hesitant now called me directly, assuring me that the DA had reviewed the footage and was preparing to file formal charges against Karen. This is textbook malicious intent, he told me, and it involves a minor. The law doesn't take that lightly. But justice didn't stop at the courthouse steps. Somehow, maybe through a neighbor, maybe someone inside the HOA, the footage made its way to the local news. The headline on the 6 o'clock broadcast read, "Caught on camera. Woman sets disabled child's backpack on fire in HOA dispute." The video aired with minimal blurring. Karen's face was unmistakable, and so was her act. Within 48 hours, the footage had gone viral, shared across parenting groups, disability rights communities, and HOA accountability forums. The comment sections exploded with outrage. This is pure evil. She should be banned from ever holding power again. That poor little girl. My heart breaks for her. As a parent of a disabled child, I've seen this kind of hate up close. I'm so glad someone caught it on camera. Strangers began reaching out with messages of support. A local advocacy group for children with disabilities sent Ava a care package with storybooks, plush toys, and a custom backpack embroidered with her name and stars. One woman even offered to start a GoFundMe to help us relocate if needed. But the biggest shock came from the community itself. The same HOA board that had ignored, deflected, and dismissed us suddenly called an emergency meeting. For the first time since we moved in, I was formally invited to speak. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need to. I brought Ava's scorch backpack. I brought printed screenshots of the video, and I brought Ava herself, if only to show them the human face behind all this quiet cruelty. I told them what it felt like to live in fear, to watch my daughter lose her joy, to be made invisible in a neighborhood that pretended to welcome us. I ended with one simple request. You can't undo what was done, but you can choose who represents this community moving forward. Choose decency. When I finished, the room was silent. Karen didn't attend the meeting, but she didn't have to. The board voted unanimously to remove her from all HOA-related roles. They released a formal apology to our family and issued a public statement condemning her actions. In a quiet but profound act of solidarity, one of the older residents, Mrs. Davison, who'd never so much as nodded our way before, walked over after the meeting and placed her hand on Ava's shoulder. "I'm sorry we didn't protect you sooner," she said. Karen was later charged with malicious destruction of property, reckless endangerment of a minor, and civil rights violation based on disability. The legal process was ongoing, But the public weight of her actions had already fallen hard. She packed up and left the neighborhood a week later. No goodbye, no fanfare, just a moving truck in the early morning and silence. For once, a different kind of silence. The kind that meant the storm had passed. The first time Ava smiled again, really smiled, it was because of her new backpack. It wasn't just any backpack. It was teal, her favorite color, with silver stars and her name embroidered in shimmering thread. But it wasn't the bag itself that made her light up. It was what came inside it. A handwritten note from a woman next door, Mrs. Davison, who'd once barely acknowledged us, now gently folded between Ava's notebooks. It read, "Every girl deserves to learn. Every star deserves to shine." Ava clutched that note to her chest like a treasure. And in that moment, I saw something come back into her eyes. Not innocence, not quite, but something close. Strength. Her smile wasn't as wide as it had once been, but it was steadier, deeper, like she knew what it meant to hold joy in a world that tried to steal it. The next morning, Ava stood by the door, dressed for school, new backpack on her shoulders. As I reached for my keys, she surprised me. "Can I go with Mrs. Davison today?" I turned and saw our elderly neighbor standing at the sidewalk with a warm smile, holding a thermos in one hand and a bright red umbrella in the other. It wasn't just a walk to school. It was something far bigger. It was the neighborhood taking a step forward, not to erase the past, but to help rewrite it. Ava waved at me and shouted, "I'll be okay, Mom. I've got my stars again." I watched her go, and I let the tears come. Not the tears of pain this time, but the kind that heal. I thought back to that awful day, when I saw the flames dancing on the edge of her school bag and smelled the smoke of her dreams burning. I remembered screaming, "Did you see what happened?" and hearing Karen say the words that nearly broke me, "She doesn't deserve school." But now, with Ava walking confidently toward the very place someone tried to take from her, I realized what Karen could never understand. This wasn't just about a backpack. It wasn't about property rules or HOA meetings. It was about motherhood, about the ferocious love that rises up when your child is threatened, about standing tall even when your voice shakes, about teaching your daughter, through pain and fire, that no one gets to decide her worth. We were not broken. We were not silent. And we were never, ever going to let hate be the last word in our story. If you've ever felt unheard, unseen, or powerless in your own neighborhood, if you've ever watched someone twist the rules to exclude you or your family, you are not alone. This story isn't just about a cruel neighbor or a burned backpack. It's about what so many families go through behind closed doors, when systems built to protect us instead protect power, when silence becomes complicity, when kindness is mistaken for weakness. But we can change that by speaking up, by standing with each other, and by sharing the stories that some would rather keep buried. If you or someone you love has lived through an HOA nightmare, if you've been bullied, harassed, or made to feel like you didn't belong, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters, and it might just help someone else feel less alone. Don't forget to subscribe to the HOA Stories for more real-life accounts of injustice, resilience, and redemption. We don't tell these stories for shock. We tell them for change, for truth, for healing. Because no one should ever have to suffer in silence, especially not our children.